Hello, I'm Sorella. I used to think silence meant peace until my sister got pregnant and my mother told me to move out of the home I built with my own hands. Said it was too quiet for someone like me. Said it would be better used for a baby. They measured the walls for a crib while I was still living there. They threw a baby shower in my house, called it Elowin's new beginning, while I watched from the top of the stairs, invisible. Then I found the lease. The fake lease with my name on it. They thought I'd go quietly, but what happens when the quiet one decides not to fold anymore? The early May morning in Portland had that soft, forgiving breeze that made my backyard feel like the only place that understood silence. I was on my knees in the dirt, thinning out basil shoots, the scent of lemon balm wafting in from the left planter box. I liked mornings like this. They made me feel whole, capable. The house stood behind me, just as I'd made it, quiet, warm, unbothered. Every shelf, every shade of paint, every fixture had been picked and placed by my hand. I was washing the soil from my fingers in the kitchen sink when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. Not uncommon, but always unsettling. I answered with a quiet, "Hi, Mom," bracing for whatever urgent yet trivial thing she'd decided couldn't wait. "Elowin's expecting," she said. Chipper. No hello, no pause. Just a statement, launched like it had been waiting on the tip of her tongue. My heart paused. What? She's having a baby. Isn't that wonderful? But listen, she needs a quiet place, something stable for the baby. And your house? Well, it just makes the most sense. My hand tightened around the phone. You're saying you want her to live here? Well, not just visit. It's really best if she moves in. She's going to need the space. You live alone, and honestly, honey, it's such a big house for just one person. I said nothing. She didn't stop. Elowin and Dorian need stability. She'll be nursing. She's tired all the time. Lord knows she won't be able to manage stairs or noise at that apartment downtown. You've always said this place is too quiet. Now that silence could actually be useful. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Mom, I live here. This is my house. Yes, of course, sweetie. I didn't mean it like that. But think about what's fair. You don't have kids. Elowin's starting a family. There it was. It had always been like this, since we were kids. Elowin got the bigger room because she needed space for her creativity. I got the leftover furniture, the passed-down things, the "you're fine with less, right?" kind of love. I'll think about it, I muttered. Wonderful, she chirped. We'll come by tomorrow around lunch to look at the space. Bring some measuring tape, maybe. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there, hands still dripping from the sink, water pooling on the tiled floor. My reflection in the microwave's black glass looked tired. Not old, but worn, like something used but well kept. I dried my hands slowly, carefully, as if every second gave me a chance to undo the last 5 minutes. By noon the next day, the doorbell rang. I didn't answer it. Didn't need to. The lock clicked. Elowin had a spare key, of course. Hello? Her voice sang down the hall. I'm in the kitchen, I called, already regretting it. She walked in first, hair curled, belly already slightly pronounced beneath a soft green knit dress. Vera followed, holding a plastic grocery bag and a small measuring tape. Without even setting the bag down, Elowin walked past me and opened the fridge. No oat milk? She said, half joking. I'm trying to go dairy-free for the baby. You don't mind if we stock a few things here, right? I forced a smile. It's your call, I guess. She didn't hear the edge in my voice, or ignored it. They moved from room to room like realtors, not family. Vera ran her hand along the hallway trim like she was inspecting a model home. Elowin tapped on the living room wall. I could mount the white noise machine here, she said. Maybe a floating shelf with little stuffed animals. You know, minimalist but sweet. Then she turned and rubbed her belly, like she was already making the announcement to Instagram. I think the guest room could work, but honestly, she looked at me, the master would be better, more light. I'll be waking up for feedings, and that bed is way better for my back. My mouth was dry. You want the master bedroom? It's just more practical, Vera said, matter-of-factly. She's pregnant, Sorella. These things matter. You'll understand when. There it was again. That unfinished sentence I'd heard versions of my entire life, the one that dangled just long enough to sting. When I have kids, when I get married. When I stop being the weird one who fixes up old houses and edits books instead of people. Look, Elowen said, smiling sweetly. We're not asking forever, just until we can get settled. Think of it like sharing. Sharing, like it was a sleepover. Like this wasn't the one place I'd built by myself, for myself after everything I'd lost. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. Instead, I made tea. We sat around the table, Elowen making Pinterest plans for her Serenity nursery, Vera chiming in about color palettes and baby-safe fabrics. They never asked if I was okay with any of it. That evening, after they'd left, after they'd talked about my house like it was a hotel they'd just booked, I walked through every room and touched each surface like I was trying to anchor myself to it. The doorknobs I'd replaced, the light switch covers I'd painted to match the new walls, the crack in the window I hadn't gotten around to fixing, not because I forgot, but because I liked how it caught the light. I wasn't sentimental, not usually, but that night, I felt like I was already being ghosted out of my own life. I sat in bed and opened the folder of home renovation photos on my laptop. There was a picture from 2 years ago, my hands covered in plaster, grinning beside a half-installed bookshelf. I scrolled and scrolled. Then the message came in. Start thinking about storage. Baby's due in 4 months. From Elowen. I stared at the text for a full minute, then I deleted it, not because I agreed, because I needed the space to think. I didn't light the candle for symbolism. I lit it because the overhead light gave me headaches, and I'd been staring at documents for hours. It was practical, just enough to see the pages fanned out across my dining table without bathing the whole room in artificial glare. On the left, the fake lease, sharp black ink on thick, smug paper. On the right, the original deed, pulled from my fireproof box with hands that didn't shake. Still crisp, despite being nearly 10 years old. My name centered on the page like a line drawn in the dirt. Sloan Turner, sole owner. No co-signers. No cohabitants. No room for revision. I sipped from a mug of tea I'd forgotten to finish hours ago. Lukewarm. Bitter. Appropriate. I titled the folder on my laptop. They think I won't fight. The next morning, the sun wandered into the kitchen like nothing had changed. Like my whole foundation hadn't shifted overnight. It filtered through the curtains in slats of pale gold, soft on the surface but indifferent to the weight pressing against my chest. That's when Vera showed up. Again. No warning, no text, just a knock, barely audible, and the unmistakable click of the door opening, the old key sliding in like it belonged, because I hadn't changed the locks yet, because part of me still believed some things weren't worth the hassle. She walked in like she owned the floor beneath her, like unannounced entrances were her right, not her imposition. I brought you something, she said brightly, as if presenting a gift rather than a maneuver. She placed a small manila envelope on the table between us like it was neutral, like it wasn't barbed. Inside, a set of keys, and a glossy, folded brochure. Bright Pines. Affordable comfort, close to everything. The cover showed a bland apartment complex rendered in perfect morning light. I scanned the brochure. 1 bedroom, ground floor, near a bus stop. Small bullet points that might appeal to someone who'd forgotten how to claim space. There's a church across the street, Vera added, and a little bodega. You'll love the quiet. She sat across from me, hands folded like she was at a performance review. She leaned forward with a conspiratorial smile. It's only temporary. Think of it as a reset. You said once that the house felt too big, remember? I didn't remember saying that. Not aloud, at least. She kept going, gentle as a velvet rope tightening. It's not like you have anyone else living with you. That place is more house than one woman needs. There it was, her real voice, soft words, sharpened edges, a nudge disguised as concern, a forced downsizing disguised as love. I nodded slowly, said nothing, flipped the brochure shut and slid it back across the table. Her smile didn't falter. Either she mistook my silence for agreement, or she hoped I would. That was always Vera's trick. Say something outrageous, watch the room freeze, and then carry on as if everyone agreed. If no one challenged her, it became truth. That's how she rewrote stories. That's how she rewrote me. After she left, I placed the keys in the drawer with the rubber bands, loose screws, and expired coupons. They clinked softly, like a lie wrapped in metal. I didn't touch them again. That night, I was looking for a casserole recipe my mother used to make. Something with crushed crackers, canned soup, and an unreasonable amount of cheese. I remembered pinning it to her Pinterest years ago. Her tablet was on the kitchen island, charging. Still unlocked, I meant to be quick, but the screen blinked on and opened the last used app. Her email. She hadn't logged out. My finger hovered over the notification bar. Elowen's name glared back in bold. I tapped. The email opened, and the first line made my stomach knot. Once she signs the transition letter, it's legally ours. My heart began to pound, not fast but heavy, like every beat was dragging something behind it. I kept reading. She's always been passive. She won't fight. We'll move the nursery in first, make it feel like home before it's even official. And then, Elowen's reply. Don't worry, she'll fold. She always folds. I didn't read the rest. I didn't need to. The betrayal was complete, efficient, signed, sealed, and ready for delivery. I took 3 screenshots, emailed them to myself, then I logged out of the app, cleared the history, closed the tablet like I hadn't just found a scalpel hidden beneath the couch cushions. I stood in the center of the living room, stared at the floorboards I'd installed myself. I remembered the nights I'd stayed up sanding until my fingers blistered, headphones in, podcast humming to keep the grief at bay after Barrett died. They thought I'd just hand it over. They thought they could erase me again. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop and typed, Free Legal Aid, Portland, Oregon. The first result? A firm specializing in property disputes for low-income women. Free consultations, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I booked the earliest appointment. Thursday at 3:45 p.m. I closed the browser, exhaled. Not relief, more like a release, a quiet unspooling. In the hallway, I reached for the fireproof box again. Opened it. Inside, the original deed, waiting patiently. My name there, steady and unchallenged. A lighthouse in stormy water. I printed the fake lease and laid it beside the real deed on the kitchen counter. They looked like truth and fiction set side by side. I lit a candle, not a scented one, just one of those stubby emergency candles that smelled faintly like wax and cardboard. It flickered like it knew something real was happening. You've underestimated me for the last time, I whispered. Not to them, to myself. It wasn't until after midnight that I sat back down at the dining table. The house was quiet in a way that didn't comfort me anymore. It felt like it was waiting. I opened my laptop, clicked New Document. The cursor blinked at the top of the blank page. I titled it, What They Think I Won't Do. And then I began to type. The first sound that caught my attention was a hollow thud. Steady, rhythmic. I was standing in the kitchen rinsing out a coffee mug when the noise filtered in through the quiet. I paused, listening. A soft metallic clink followed, like the tip of a paint can lid settling against tile. I set the mug down. I hadn't approved any work. As I stepped out of the kitchen and down the hall toward the guest room, the scent hit me first, artificial lavender and wet primer. Then I heard Elowen laugh, not loud but clearly comfortable, like someone rearranging what belonged to them. I reached the doorway and stopped. The room had been emptied. Gone were the soft green curtains I'd hemmed myself, the old rug from my college years, rolled and leaning against the hallway wall, the bookshelf I'd thrifted and refinished with my own hands, moved. The shelf in the corner, the one that held my father's photo in its wooden frame next to the cedar box of handwritten notes he'd left before passing, wasn't just moved, it was missing entirely. A stranger stood with a paint roller in hand, covering the pale gray walls with something pastel and lifeless. Pale peach or cream? I couldn't tell. It was the color of hospitals or Instagram nurseries. Elowen turned and smiled, her eyes lighting up like this was a grand reveal. "Oh, you're just in time to see the transformation," she said, rubbing her belly. "We thought this would be the perfect room. Lots of light, quiet. It's got the best energy in the house." I glanced around slowly, my eyes scanning the corners where memories used to live. "Where's the shelf?" I asked. My voice didn't rise, but it didn't hide the weight behind the question either. She waved her hand casually, not even pausing her slow steps across the room. "We had to get rid of it. Too much emotional clutter. Babies are sensitive to that sort of thing. Energy matters." My body stiffened, but I kept my tone even. "What did you do with the contents?" "What contents?" she asked, like she genuinely didn't understand. "The photo, the letters." She frowned, then tilted her head. "Oh, those old things? I think Mom tossed them. Or maybe they're in the garage. I don't know. Honestly, you probably don't need that stuff anymore. It's been, what, 10 years?" She didn't wait for me to respond. She turned back to the designer, who had started measuring the opposite wall. I didn't say a word. I walked out, slowly, and down the stairs to the garage. It took me 10 minutes of digging through bins and trash bags to find them. My father's letters, folded and yellowing, tossed carelessly between an old mop and a box of expired baby bottles. The photo frame had cracked. The glass had splintered into 3 sharp lines across his face. I sat on the garage steps with the cedar box in my lap and stared at the photo. No tears came. I waited for them, expected them even, but nothing. Only a hollow ache, the kind of ache that's too familiar to surprise you anymore. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, I stood in the backyard. I held the frame under the porch light, brushing away dirt from the corner. From the kitchen window, I could see the fresh coat of paint glistening in the guest room, what used to be mine, now scrubbed clean for Elowen's new beginning. They thought they were building a nursery, but all I saw was a grave for my father's memory. For the days I spent in that room rebuilding myself after I lost my own child, an early miscarriage, years ago, when I thought I'd still have the chance to carry something forward. I never told Elowen or Mom, not out of shame, just, I knew they wouldn't understand the kind of grief that settles in silence. I spent weeks sanding those walls after that loss, nights laying tile when I couldn't sleep. That room wasn't just a guest room. It was where I decided I'd keep living. I picked up the cracked photo and the letters and went inside. I wiped them off and set them on my desk. Then I pulled out my laptop, logged onto a retail site, and ordered a document scanner. A good one. High resolution, fast feed. If they were going to erase me, I'd at least leave behind a record. Over the next few days, I scanned every receipt, every utility bill, every contractor invoice. If my name touched it, I saved it. I sorted them into folders, labeled and color-coded like a paralegal prepping for court. I didn't confront them. I didn't mention the shelf again. I didn't argue when Vera talked about Elowen's nesting phase or when she bragged about how warm the space feels now. I simply documented, quietly, deliberately. And each night, I added one more note to my private file titled, "They Think I Won't." Still, it hurt more than I let on. Each time I passed that room, I could still see the green curtains in my memory. I could hear my dad's voice reading his letters to me in the back of my mind. I could remember the feel of the sanding block against the wall, my tears mixing with sawdust and sweat. I didn't cry anymore. I remembered. The night after the designer came to hang the new curtains, the ones Elowen ordered with a print of foxes and stars, I walked into my bathroom and looked in the mirror. Not just glanced, looked. My face was harder now. Not mean, but resolved. My hair was pulled back tightly, a few gray strands at the temples not yet surrendered to die. I didn't smile. I took a post-it from the drawer beside the sink. On it, I wrote, "Remember everything." I pressed it onto the mirror, just beside my reflection. I didn't need to rage. I didn't need to break anything, but I needed to remember, because I knew they were going to keep forgetting. I didn't go downstairs right away. From my bedroom window, I could already see the balloons, pink and cream, tied in pairs, bobbing lightly in the backyard breeze. A table had been unfolded near the fence, covered in a thin plastic tablecloth printed with cartoon bunnies. Folding chairs were arranged in a semicircle beneath a pop-up canopy someone had dragged from the garage without asking. Then came the rustling, the clatter of glass, and laughter. Light, cheerful, rehearsed. I tightened the tie on my robe and moved toward the staircase. Halfway down, I heard Vera's voice greet someone at the door. "Welcome! Come in, come in! Yes, this is Elowin's new place. Isn't it just perfect for a young family?" The words hit me like a dull thud to the back of the skull. Not the lie itself, I'd heard worse, but the confidence in it. As though I'd vacated without a word, as though I'd never existed here. By the time I reached the bottom step, more guests had arrived. Cars lined the street, some parked so close to my mailbox I doubted the mailman could deliver anything today. A woman I didn't recognize stepped inside holding a pastel gift bag. I didn't stop her. No one did. I walked into my kitchen and froze. The center island, usually clear, had been turned into a buffet. Store-bought cupcakes, fruit skewers, a punch bowl with floating raspberries. But it wasn't just the food. The decor had changed too. My tea mugs were missing, replaced by paper cups with cartoon elephants. The magnet collection on my fridge, pieces from road trips I'd taken alone, cities I loved, had been taken down. In their place, baby-themed stickers, Mommy to be, guess the due date, welcome little one. And my bookshelf? It now held diapers. Not books, diapers. Elowin appeared from the hallway, dressed in a soft ivory dress, cradling her belly like a delicate vase. Her face lit up when she saw me, not with warmth, but like I was a painting she had to walk around. "Oh, I'm so glad you're here," she said. "We weren't sure if you were going to join, but it's nice, right? We thought it'd be sweet to celebrate here. It feels right." I blinked. "Did you?" She cut me off. "Don't worry. We'll clean up after. Mom handled most of it, honestly. She wanted to surprise me." Surprise. That word. As though this were a gift. As though this desecration of space and memory had been carefully wrapped and tied with a ribbon. She walked away before I could respond, already pulling someone into a selfie in front of a banner that read, "Home Sweet Family." I stood by the fridge for a moment, not moving. A few people glanced at me, then away. One woman whispered, "Is that her sister?" Another responded, "I thought she said they bought this place." They, not me. I slipped out the back door. The sun was bright, too bright, like it wanted to expose every lie unfolding inside my walls. I found shade behind the shed, sat on the overturned planter box, and watched the party continue. The balloons danced like they were mocking me. I stayed out there for nearly 30 minutes, long enough to hear Vera laugh her signature laugh, sharp, performative, meant to signal to guests that everything was perfect. Eventually, I went back inside, not because I wanted to, but because the numbness had shifted into something sharper. Not rage, not yet, but something awake. I climbed the stairs quietly and walked straight to the bathroom. I closed the door, turned on the sink, and let the water run until the mirror fogged. Then I wiped a clean circle with my palm and looked at myself. No tears, no shock, just recognition. "They want me invisible," I whispered. And I realized then, it wasn't enough for them to take the house. They wanted to rewrite the story too. Make me the distant aunt who used to live here, the one who faded out of the picture. Quiet, convenient, not anymore. I walked into my office and opened the drawer where I kept my paperwork. I'd already started compiling receipts, but now I added a new column in my ledger. Events hosted without consent. Under it, I wrote the date. Description: baby shower. Estimated damages. Emotional plus property displacement TBD. I took out my phone and photographed the fridge. The banner, the cupcakes. I recorded a slow video walkthrough of each room, narrating quietly, listing every object that had been moved, removed, or replaced. By the time I was done, the guests were clapping downstairs. Someone had given a toast. I didn't care what they said. Downstairs, Vera laughed again, loud, sharp, grating, the kind of laugh that tries too hard. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching her from behind the railing. Elowin stood beside her, hand on her belly, nodding and smiling as if she owned the world. "Celebrate," I whispered. "I'm collecting." By the time I came down for coffee the next morning, the party balloons had already wilted, sagging against the fence like they knew the celebration had no business being here. The backyard was littered with half-deflated decor, plastic cutlery, and a paper plate with frosting smeared into the grain of my deck railing. I didn't bother cleaning it up, not yet. On the dining table, next to my placemat and the latest grocery flyer, sat a thick manila folder. It hadn't been there the night before. I knew that because I'd cleared the table myself before bed, the way I always did. I didn't touch it at first. I made my coffee, stirred in a splash of oat milk, took 2 sips, then with my left hand so I could keep my right free in case I needed to throw something. I opened it. Inside was a lease transfer form, already filled out, my name printed at the top, next to previous tenant. Elwyn Hadley Bell listed as incoming primary resident. The date, July 1st. Terms, 0 rent, transfer of responsibility and use of premises for maternal health accommodations. A sticky note was attached to the front, written in my mother's handwriting. Just sign when you're ready, sweetie. Elwyn needs peace before the baby comes. Peace. That word again. The same one she'd used when she tried to get me to move out after Dad's funeral. The same word she'd used when she insisted I let Elwyn borrow my car for a few weeks, 5 years ago, right before it got sold, and I never saw it again. I didn't tear the paper, didn't crumple it, didn't scream. I slipped it into a new folder I labeled fiction and slid it into the second drawer of my file cabinet, right next to the real deed, the one with my name embossed in black ink. That night, we had dinner at home. Elwyn sitting at my table like it was hers, rubbing her belly and smiling as she scrolled through baby name forums on her phone. Vera passed her the butter dish and launched into a monologue about baby showers in the 80s. I stayed mostly silent, poking at my steamed carrots, waiting, and then it came, right on schedule. You know, Vera said, placing her fork down gently like she was preparing for a deposition. I just worry about Elwyn. Her doctor said her blood pressure's been higher lately. Elwyn made a quiet, pitiful noise, the kind that says, "See what I'm going through?" without using actual words. Vera looked at me. And stress isn't good for the baby. There it was, the guilt grenade. I leaned back slightly, placing my napkin on the table. This house, I said evenly, lowered my blood pressure, until you both moved in. The room stilled. Elwyn's fork paused mid-air. Vera blinked. That's not fair, Elwyn whispered. No, I said. It's not. But neither is being gaslit in your own home. Vera's mouth opened, probably to toss another moralistic bomb wrapped in sweet talk, but I stood before she could launch it. I cleared my plate, walked into the kitchen, and rinsed it. Then I turned to them and said, "Dinner's done. So am I." I didn't slam anything, didn't storm off. I walked upstairs and shut my bedroom door like a woman who had just decided something permanent. Afterward, I sat at my desk and printed a sign in bold black letters. Owner, Sorella Hadley, do not remove without permission. I taped it to my bedroom door. Next, I pulled out my phone and walked the house, snapping time-stamped photos of every room. The new furniture, the decorations, the rearranged shelves. I recorded a video, quietly narrated, detailing what was mine, what had been altered, and what they'd brought in without permission. I submitted a preliminary inquiry to the tenant court's website before bed. Just a question about uninvited occupants. No names, not yet, but enough. The next morning, the tone in the house shifted. Elwyn didn't say good morning. Her tone, when she asked about the toaster, was clipped, formal, like a coworker you don't like, but still need to get information from. Vera didn't ask if I wanted coffee. She made 2 cups and walked out to the porch without looking at me. I sat at the kitchen island, coffee in one hand, my leather-bound notebook in the other. I logged each movement they made that morning. Time, 7:32 a.m. Event, Elwyn entered bathroom, closed door, stayed for 13 minutes, music playing from her phone. Time, 7:51 a.m. Event, Vera opened mail, shoved something into purse before I could see it. No eye contact. They were shifting, tensing up. Their posture wasn't casual anymore. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. They were watching me now, too. Good. I'd already shifted. I'd already chosen to stop playing the role they wrote for me. Let them squirm. I'd pushed back, They chose war. I was sitting in the waiting room of a small legal clinic off Alberta Street, scrolling through my phone while sipping from a vending machine coffee that tasted like burnt plastic. The walls around me were painted a color that couldn't decide between beige and yellow, and the air conditioning rattled like it was working overtime but getting nowhere. Across from me, a couple argued softly in Spanish. To my right, a volunteer attorney called out someone's name. I scrolled mindlessly. Email, weather, Instagram, and then I saw it. A photo of my porch, Elowen, standing in front of my front door, belly full and hands folded gently beneath it. The angle soft and warm, edited with a pink-tinted filter. The caption read, "So grateful for our new home as we prepare to welcome baby Ezra. All made possible thanks to Mom. Couldn't do this without her love and support." Dozens of likes. Heart emojis. Beautiful! So happy for you guys! That porch looks dreamy. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Not one mention of me, not my name, not a tag, not even a vague thank you to the person who'd spent the past 8 years making that porch what it was, refinishing the wood, repainting the railing, planting the jasmine that climbed the trellis behind her in that photo. And the worst part? She wasn't lying to them, not directly, but the absence of my name was intentional. It was erasure, made public. I didn't comment. I didn't like it. I didn't screenshot it. I just closed the app and placed the phone face down on the seat next to me. I left the clinic with a packet of information in my bag and a follow-up appointment for the next week. I walked home instead of taking the bus, needing the air to cool something in me I wasn't ready to name. By the time I stepped through the front door, I saw another package on the entryway bench. I knew what it was. The photo album. I had spent weeks assembling it. Handwritten notes, photos of Dad holding Elowen as a baby, a tiny baby blanket I'd knit with the same pattern Grandma had once used on mine. It was supposed to be my gift to Elowen. A real one, not for show, something personal, not performative, but the label had been torn open, and Vera, of course, had beat me to it. Later that evening, while I was reheating leftover rice in the microwave, I heard Elowen's delighted voice from the living room. "Oh wow, Mom, this is beautiful." I turned the corner just in time to see her holding the album. "It's perfect. You even found that picture of me with Dad at the lake." Vera beamed. "I knew you'd love it." No one looked at me. Not a glance. I stood there, wooden spoon in hand, watching them flip through my work like it had always been theirs. No correction, no hesitation. That night, I didn't go to bed angry. I went to bed methodical. I got up early the next morning, before anyone else had stirred, and started removing my belongings from the shared spaces. My books from the shelf, the antique vase from the mantel, the framed poetry print from the hallway. I carried each item into my room, slowly, silently, like retrieving artifacts from a house being slowly taken over by strangers. Then, I taped a printed statement to the refrigerator door. "You are occupying this home rent-free. Legal notice pending." I placed one on the inside of the front door, another above the dishwasher, a fourth taped to the inside of the laundry room cabinet. They saw them, I know they did, but no one said anything. After breakfast, I pulled receipts from the manila folders in my filing cabinet, plumbing invoices, roof repair bills, kitchen renovation contracts. I took photos of each one, scanned them into my laptop, and saved them in a new folder labeled "Claiming What's Mine." I found the email address of the legal aid attorney I'd met and attached the documents with a short note. "See attached. Let me know next steps." No flourishes, no explanations, just facts. That evening, I printed a black and white sign in bold font and taped it inside the front window, visible from the street. "This home is owned solely by Sorella Hadley. Any claim otherwise is fraudulent." I stood on the sidewalk across the street and stared at it for a long while. Cars passed behind me. A teenager skateboarded by, earbuds in, oblivious. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked. Inside the house, no one moved the sign. I didn't expect them to. I expected silence. And that's what I got. Back inside, I pulled the curtains shut. Every last one. I didn't want them peeking through. Not now. I sat on the couch with my laptop balanced on my knees and opened the folder titled "Legal," newly renamed from "Just in Case." And I began building my case, quietly, precisely, without an ounce of apology. They thought I'd crumble, but they had no idea how steady a woman can stand when the ground beneath her was poured by her own hands. By the time I stepped outside that morning, the sun had just climbed above the rooftops, casting long, clean shadows across the street. I walked barefoot to the curb, pulling my robe tighter as I reached into the mailbox. It wasn't until I sorted through the stack of envelopes that my hands stopped moving. Half of it wasn't mine. Medical statements addressed to Elowyn Hadley Bell, flyers for baby gear, prenatal vitamin samples, a folded catalog with a coupon clipped to the front that read, "Your baby deserves the best start, right at home." Home. I hadn't changed the address. They had, not just hers, mine too. Elowyn's name was listed directly under mine on the mailbox now, typed neatly on a label Vera must have printed in the kitchen. I stood there for longer than I care to admit, the mail limp in my hand, not from the weight of the paper, but from the realization that they weren't just squatting. They were installing themselves like permanent fixtures, like termites that smiled sweetly as they chewed through the foundation. I walked slowly back inside. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence you only notice when it's covering something ugly. I made it halfway up the stairs when I realized I hadn't seen my slippers. I checked the bedroom. My bedroom was empty. Not completely. The bed was still there, made perfectly tight, as if untouched. But my books were gone. My sweaters, the jewelry box from Aunt Sharon, the framed photo of me and Dad at the beach. Missing. Panic didn't hit me immediately. It was more like a rising sense of absurdity, like walking into a hotel room and realizing someone else had unpacked their things there already. I turned and walked down the hallway. Past the bathroom, down to the garage. There, stacked against the far wall in labeled boxes, were my belongings. Spare. That's what the boxes said. In thick black Sharpie, written in Vera's handwriting. I opened one. Sweaters, folded neatly, like they were prepping them for donation. I heard footsteps behind me. "Morning," Vera said, not even looking up from her coffee mug. "I just thought we'd get ahead of things. You don't really use the space much anymore." My voice stayed calm. "That's my room." "It's a house, Sorella," she said, as if I were the one being ridiculous. "Rooms shift. Priorities shift." Before I could reply, Elowyn entered, yawning and barefoot, brushing crumbs from her sweatshirt. "It's only fair we make space for the baby," she said softly, as if the tone would make it sound less violent. I stared at them both. "I didn't give you permission," Vera shrugged. "You didn't say no either, and you've always been quiet." I didn't answer, not because I agreed, but because I knew anything I said in that moment would be wasted. I closed the box, walked past them, took a shower, got dressed, and left the house. A walk to nowhere, through the neighborhood, past kids on bikes, dogs tugging leashes, sprinkler systems ticking rhythmically in front yards. I passed a house for sale 3 blocks down. A sold sign had just been zip-tied to the post. When I returned home, I wasn't even inside before the doorbell rang. It was 2:58 p.m. I opened the door to find a woman standing on my porch, heels, blazer, clipboard. Real estate agent, maybe early 30s, too polished for this neighborhood. "Hi," she said. "I'm here for the 3:00 showing. Ms. Elowyn scheduled it." I stared at her. "You're standing on property you have no right to sell," I said. She blinked. "Excuse me? Elowyn doesn't own this house. Neither does Vera. There is no showing." She stepped back, clearly uncomfortable, realizing something was very wrong. I'm sorry, I was just told to." I held up a hand. "You didn't know. But now you do. This property is mine, fully, legally. You can leave now." She nodded quickly, muttered something about miscommunication, and nearly tripped getting back to her car. Inside, Vera and Elowyn stood in the kitchen whispering. They didn't look surprised when I walked in. "She'll cave," Elowyn murmured. Vera sipped her tea. "She always caves." That sentence stuck to the walls. I stood there for a full minute, watching them, watching the space they'd overtaken like it was rightfully theirs. I thought about the fake lease, the boxes, the mail, the baby shower, the Instagram post. I thought about the housewarming card Vera gave Elowyn just 2 nights ago, signed, "To Our Future." And I finally moved. I went upstairs, picked up my phone, scrolled to Clara's number. My hands shook as I typed, But my voice, when it came, was clear. "It's happening," I said. "I'm filing the eviction. Today." There was a pause on the line. Then Clara's voice, firm, warm, without hesitation. "It's about time." I exhaled, walked to my laptop, opened the folder titled Legal. By sunset, the papers were signed, and they had no idea what was coming. I left the lawyer's office with a folder tucked under one arm and a quiet, deliberate rhythm in my steps. The sun was low, slanting sideways across the pavement, and I could feel the beginning of Portland's late July heat climbing into the soles of my shoes. The USB drive in my purse held every piece of evidence, every receipt, every message, and every small act of disrespect that built this storm. The building was modest, just 2 stories above a dental clinic, but inside, the attorney's expression had shifted from skepticism to certainty the moment I placed the fireproof envelope in front of him. He flipped slowly through the stack. The original deed, notarized and dated, my name crisp at the top. Then came the itemized expenses, utilities, roof repair, landscaping, insulation, permits, line after line of cost, labor, and ownership. I watched his eyes flick over the photos I'd taken of the altered rooms, of Elowin's decorations covering my fireplace, of Vera's handwriting labeling my belongings as spare. Then he landed on the social media screenshots, Elowin's post claiming the house, thanking Vera as though I didn't exist, her baby registry using my home's address, the email chain I'd printed that discussed the fake lease, the plan to push me out gently, and the words that still echoed louder than I ever expected. "She always folds." The attorney didn't say much, just glanced up, nodded, and said, "You did everything right. Now let's serve them." That night, I didn't sleep much. I didn't need to. I stayed up organizing digital folders, backing everything to cloud storage, triple-checking dates and annotations. The silence of the house felt different now, not suffocating, not tense, just still, like the eye of a storm before the final pass. At 6:13 p.m. the next day, 2 sheriff's deputies knocked on my front door. I'd timed it so they'd arrive during dinner. Elowin answered, barefoot and smiling. She was wearing a loose dress I didn't recognize, her hair braided down the side like she'd come from a lifestyle shoot. Her smile faltered when she saw the badges. One of the deputies held out an envelope, his voice calm but clear. "You are being served an eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. If you wish to dispute the claim, you may file a response within 10 business days." She blinked at him, then looked at the envelope like it was written in another language. Vera appeared in the hallway, fork still in her hand. Her face went pale, the kind of pale that comes from realization, not illness. "I'm sorry. What is this?" she asked. I stepped around the deputies, quiet and steady. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I walked upstairs without a word, closed my door, and sat by the window with a mug of tea. Below, I could hear muffled voices rising and falling. Panic, denial, confusion. But no apology. 3 weeks later, we were in court. They tried to argue it down, of course. Elowin showed up in a flowing maternity blouse, her voice full of practiced warmth. "This was all a misunderstanding," she told the judge. "My mother offered me a place to stay, and Sorella never objected. We'd discussed it over dinner." There was a verbal agreement. The judge, a woman in her 60s with tight silver curls and an expression like stone, barely looked up from the file in front of her. "You are not on the deed. You have not paid rent. You have not contributed to utilities. And according to the record before me, you and your mother attempted to execute an unapproved lease using the owner's full legal name without consent." Elowin tried again, softer this time. "She's my sister. I just wanted a safe place to raise my baby." The judge leaned forward. "This isn't about intentions, Ms. Hadley Bell. It's about ownership, evidence, and the law. And right now, the law is not on your side." The verdict came quickly. Eviction upheld. 30 days to vacate, no extensions. $13,700 in damages awarded to me for unauthorized use of space, utilities, and emotional distress. No right to appeal. Vera didn't speak a single word during the entire hearing. She sat next to Elowin like she'd swallowed something bitter and didn't know how to spit it out. When the judge adjourned, I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I gathered my papers and walked past them in silence. Outside, Clara waited for me on the courthouse steps. "How'd it go?" she asked, even though she already knew. I handed her the stamped court order. She glanced at it, then nodded. "They didn't see it coming, did they?" I shook my head. "They never do." That night, I sat on the porch with a fresh cup of coffee. The house behind me was still. Empty, for the first time in months. Not silent because I'd been pushed into a corner. Silent because I'd reclaimed every inch. For the first time in a long while, the quiet wasn't a punishment. It was mine, and it felt earned. But silence isn't the end. It's the beginning of something I never expected. The house breathed differently now. It was still, sure, but no longer tight with tension. The kind of silence I'd once resented had softened into something else entirely, something earned. It wasn't empty. It was open. It had been a little over 5 weeks since the court ruling. Elwyn and Vera left with more noise than I expected. The day they packed, I stayed upstairs. Boxes thumped down the stairs. Vera barked instructions. Elwyn cried on the phone, maybe to Dorian, maybe to someone else trying to rescue the version of her life she'd paraded online. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't wave goodbye. I waited until their car turned off my street, and then I finally exhaled. 3 days later, Clara showed up at my front door holding an old, faded photo between 2 fingers. "Guess what I found at the bottom of my closet?" she said, stepping inside before I could answer. I took the photo. It was us, early 20s, covered in paint, grinning with pride next to a mismatched bookshelf we'd just finished staining. Behind us, my backyard. Unrecognizable now, but still somehow familiar. She looked around the living room, touched the trim near the window. "This place still feels like you," she said. I hadn't heard that in years. Not since before the house became a battleground. Not since before my name was reduced to an afterthought on someone else's lease agreement. We made tea, sat on the porch, and talked for hours. About nothing. About everything. Clara was the first person in months to call me by name without asking for anything. The following week, a blog post made the rounds online, a local lifestyle column called Better Together. The article detailed how a well-known influencer couple had been evicted from their family home due to legal misrepresentation. Screenshots of court documents were embedded halfway down the page, along with links to the judge's statement and a short quote from the plaintiff. Me, I hadn't spoken to the journalist, but truth has a funny way of surfacing. Elwyn disappeared from social media almost overnight. Her brand sponsors dropped her within days. Dorian moved out, according to a neighbor who saw him carrying boxes to an Uber around midnight. Vera, from what I heard, went to stay with her cousin in Salem and hadn't been seen since. There was no confrontation, no final showdown, just a quiet retreat from the roles they'd written for themselves in my life. I didn't feel vindicated, not exactly, but I did feel lighter. One Tuesday morning in early September, I called a contact Clara had passed along, her cousin, who worked with a local women's shelter that offered transitional housing for clients leaving abusive or coercive family dynamics. I explained my idea to turn the guest room, not a nursery, not a battleground, into a quiet space for women like me, like I had been. "I don't have much," I told her, "but I have a safe house. And I'm not using that room for ghosts anymore." The woman, Teresa, paused on the other end of the line. Then she said, "That's more than enough." We set up a basic agreement, a 60-day stay limit, light screening through the shelter, weekly check-ins, no rent, just dignity. Her name was Rachel. She arrived on a Thursday with 2 children and 1 duffel bag. That was it. The kids were quiet, wide-eyed, gripping her legs like barnacles. Rachel looked exhausted, not just physically, but existentially, like someone who'd spent too long in a room where she had to whisper just to stay alive. I gave her the tour, showed her the guest room, soft lighting, clean linens, a bookshelf with paperbacks and coloring books. I told her where to find the towels, the extra toothbrushes, the emergency snacks. Then I handed her the key. She looked at it for a long time before taking it. "No one's erasing you here," I said. She nodded, too tired to respond. The kids curled onto the bed together. Rachel closed the door softly behind her. That night, I watered the garden. The late summer tomatoes were thriving. The air smelled like dirt and basil and second chances. Every morning after that, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote in my journal again. Nothing poetic, just truths. What I noticed, what I felt, what I didn't want to forget. Dad's photo was back on the hallway shelf. The cedar box, too. I didn't dust it anymore. I let it be part of the room, lived in and imperfect. The bookshelf Clara and I had built was now in the guest room. Rachel placed a family photo on it the third day she was there. Some evenings, when the house was completely still, I'd sit on the porch and watch the windows glow from inside, not with intrusion, but with comfort. People used to say silence meant something was wrong, but I'd learned otherwise. Sometimes silence is the sound of survival. Sometimes it's the sound of beginning again. They tried to replace me. I chose to remain. Sometimes the quietest people carry the heaviest truths and the deepest strength. This wasn't just a story about eviction or betrayal. It was about reclaiming space, voice, and dignity. What would you do if your own family treated your life like a spare room? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters.